Hello, good morning. Welcome to Blabbit. Joshua, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Victory.
There we
can.
go. All
All
right.
right, sorry, guys. I don't know why my camera is so zoomed in though. That's wild.
We'll just have to go with it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Blabbit. Blabbit is where we bring experts in their fields in so that you can hear information from them that you might not normally have access to. Blabbit, as always, is brought to you by Open Doors. Open Doors is your premier communication and podcast corporation partner. For those of you who haven't been with us before, my name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working in coaching and training people in the sales arena for the last 2 decades. I know that's hard to believe because I look 25. Paul, how are you?
I'm not quite feeling as youthful as you, Glenn, but it's great to see you and Josh, who is on the road today. So I'm sure he's going to do everything in his power to be remotely interesting. You like that one? Yeah, that'll be the last one. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Geiger. Yeah, don't bet on it. My name is Paul Geiger. I'm a public speaking coach, presentation expert out of New York City, and I help individuals and organizations really clarify their ability to speak with authenticity, which develops trust, which eventually leads to persuasion. We're all in the same business, aren't we, Josh?
Absolutely. This is the game we play, Paul. Even the dad jokes, we all do those too.
Yeah, that's true. Now, you have been gracious enough to be on Blabbit quite a few times, and I'm sure some of our listeners already know who you are, but for anyone who doesn't, please just give them a quick bio.
Yeah, so my name's Josh Beechraft. Long story short, I was a shy, weird kid in high school, and I found magic of all things and started doing all sorts of trickery and sorcery, and people liked it to my surprise. And that led me to learning about presentation skills, which then led me to marketing, which I've been doing professionally now for almost a decade on my own, but I've actually started back in 2008. So I was a hobbyist for a few years, and now that's my full-time everything is some level of marketing, whether it's coaching people or running digital agencies or handling other clients and consulting and showing up to events and speaking and you name it. I'm doing some part of it at some point every single year. So that's the broad strokes. I really specialize in search engine optimization, but pretty fluent in just about all things in the digital marketing world.
Well, thank you for coming, Josh. It's great to see you again. Let me ask you this. We always hear, or I at least see published a lot online, this little service or that type of thing businesses need to do, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, blah, 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 blah. So what type of advice would you give any business that's starting out in marketing as far as what their foundation should be versus maybe what some of us call chasing shiny objects?
Yeah, so really the first thing, if there's two worlds of marketing. So I guess I'll start with that. And there's branding and there's direct response. And what happens so often is people confuse the two, and they think that branding, it leads to direct responses, and branding is a little bit more of an indirect response that is supportive of the overall marketing effort. So an example of this would be if I told you that I could save you $1 million with your life insurance, but you went to my life insurance page and it was like just this shoddy looking website and there was no logo and all these, you just wouldn't believe me, right? So even if it was true, you wouldn't believe me. So the first thing is become believable, right? And becoming believable means getting a basic level of your branding foundation down. Have a logo, have a professional website and presence. Start working on things so when people search for you, they can find you appropriately under your brand name before you really start exploring too many other things around your offer. Because there's Dean Jackson is big in the internet marketing community, and he had a concept called cheese and whiskers. And the idea here is that a mouse would chew through a wall just to get a little tiniest piece of cheese, but if it feels one little flick of a cat whisker, it's gone. So however motivating that offer of cheese is completely diminished by one thing that doesn't look right. So when you have your brand set properly, that's not going to throw anybody off the scent of what the offer is. It's not going to distract from that offer. and move from there. As far as tactically into, you mentioned social media and stuff like that, that plays into it. Social media is a branding play that leads into direct response, but you can't just go to social media and offer direct response. You have to do social first, media second, right? So you have to engage people at some level, which is true of anything you're doing in marketing. It's no different. Social media is just a place where marketing can happen, but that marketing is mimicking a social interaction that you might have at a trade show booth, or if people are walking into your actual store and having a conversation with people, and then an offer is present there. The difference is with social media is people aren't coming in because of the offer. They're coming in because they've seen something else interesting that you were doing at a social activity level, and then that led over to the offer, right? So there's a blending that happens there. But that foundational brand piece is critically important to not throw off your direct response efforts.
So then if your branding is all in place, if you do have, you are doing consistent marketing, you are doing consistent brand recognition within your target community, how important is the offer then? In other words, the offer that gets you the direct response. What are the missing steps? What are some of the missteps that people make?
Yeah, so the big misstep on the offer is one, a lot of people, believe it or not, don't actually know what business they're in, and their offers don't really line up with the business that they're actually in. So I'll give you an example of a roofer that I worked with one time. This roofer was outstanding on the way that he positioned everything. Branding was on point, but when he talked to people, he said, "Listen, I'm not a roofer. I'm an insurance liaison." And because he was representing himself as the person who is an intermediary for the insurance company that happened to own a roofing company, his offer was different than everybody else in the roofing business. So even though his final product was roofing, his real business was being able to handle the insurance companies for people and leading with that offer. And he was crushing everybody in his marketplace because he just simply had a better offer and understood the business he was in much, much better. Roofing was the final outcome, but the actual business he was conducting as far as people were concerned was working with the insurance companies to get this roof paid for. Because the perception is, if you're a roofing company, you do roofs. So how does your offer make any sense versus the other guys? I just need somebody who does roofs. Well, actually, people need somebody who can work with the insurance company to make sure that things are taken care of the right way, documented the right way, and then covered so they don't have to come out of pocket for their roof. So understanding that nuance is the first piece to really getting your offer right, and knowing that you're in the business, like in the agency business, which is one that I'm in. Like, it's easy for us to say, well, we do SEO. And it's like, well, cool. What's your offer? Well, we search engine optimization. We get you ranked page 1. Well, like, yeah, but what does that actually mean? The offer is that we actually get you qualified traffic to your offers and services. So that way you've got the best customer becoming aware of your unique solution. So you're not looking, you don't have to spray your offer out there everywhere. We can just get it in front of the right people that are looking for it at the right time. That's a different offer than saying we do SEO. So understanding the actual business you're in a more nuanced way is really important. And then the second piece to that, you can't do one without the other, is understanding what is actually important to the customer, right? Because you can't know what business you're actually in if you don't know what's actually important to the customer. And the outcome is they need a roof, or they need to be a page 1 of Google, or even position number 1. But those are just features of your offer. Those are not the actual thing that you're doing. You're actually providing a bigger service in most cases. Is that helpful? Did that answer it the right way, or did I?
Actually, I have 12 more questions, but it's Glenn's turn.
So it sounds like when you're talking about SEO, it sounds like you're treating Google as your first customer, to making sure that Google understands the brand, Google understands the services, because do we really just live in Google's world?
Yeah, in a certain way we do. And absolutely, you want Google to understand your brand implicitly, right? There can't be any confusion with Google as to what your brand is, because if there is confusion, then your customer is confused as well, because they're going to Google as the trusted resource to learn what they need to learn ultimately, right? For what you have to offer and how your service works, at least to the extent that they would contact you to discover more about your product. So yeah, Google is absolutely your first customer in that sense. And because of that, it's actually all of your customers, right? You get that right, you get all of your customers right.
Well, I have a couple of things rolling around in my head, and I know for a lot of our audience, they have their own businesses. Some work in larger corporations where they don't have to make all of these decisions. But let's pinpoint to the people who are in charge not only of their branding, but also putting their offer together. Have you run into clients who at the motivation of trying to be different actually lose sight of who their customer is? In other words, we all want to stand out. We all want to be different than the 100 other people who literally do what it is that we do. Sometimes do we take that too far, or has it been taken too far where you actually slide out of your lane?
Yeah, 100% that happens, but there's really a couple of thoughts there, because one is, first you need to know your lane in a certain way, because just because you do something like roofs, let's say, maybe you specialized in high-end roofs or commercial roofs or some other variation within the market of the overall roofing market, and some people slide in and out of the lane of which markets or which sub market they're in within their overall topic, right? And then there's people that get it wrong completely. Like, they might do something in their marketing that's like a free bed and sheets with every roof installation, right? It's like, well, those things don't connect together in a way that's actually that interesting or compelling, right? So it's like, well, I never thought about new roofs or new sheets, but like, I guess if you're doing them right. But if you have something that's more in line with the actual thinking, so like a different example of this might be is like, um, uh, if your offer includes some kind of let's say you were doing roofing and you were going to include, many roofers like will pay the insurance deductible, or they'll do something else on the cash side to be able to help with things, but certain laws in different states don't allow that. So maybe your offer is everybody has a lawn that needs mowed, so like maybe you could go new lawnmower with that, and you can actually connect that reasonably. And if it's not the lawnmower, then it's like, what else makes sense? Does the salesperson can work that to say, you have a free X $1,000 bonus just for signing a new roof. We can figure out where that goes, right? So sometimes being too specific in that leads people down the wrong thing. Like, I don't care about a lawnmower, but a $2,000 stipend for whatever it is that you want if you sign a roof with us. Well, that's a different story, because now the husband wants a new lawnmower, wife wants a new washer and dryer, refrigerator. That's where you can get creative that way, which would normally take you out of your lane, but then you can actually use it to your advantage by just turning it into the right kind of benefit through the general sales process of discovery, right? So I think I answered that right, but it's definitely a thing where people get off track. And most of the time you don't see it because the companies that got off track aren't around anymore, right? So like you can't sell the wrong offer and stay in business. So what's really nice about marketing is you'll know that you're wrong because the market isn't responding, right? So, and that's the real business us as marketers are in, is to define what response we can get and come up with the creative solutions to make sure that that's working regardless. So the real thing is like, you shouldn't assume that you know your lane. You should test that you're correct in your theory on what lane you're in, but then also run some tests to see where you start to move out of that lane and it's still effective. Because the more creativity you can have in your marketing that makes it interesting or entertaining or more provocative that way, absolutely is the right way to be.
But you bring up an interesting word, and Glenn, you've mentioned this, and quite a few of our other guests have, and that is testing, and the fact that the majority of us don't do enough of it. Right, Glenn?
100%.
What do you think?
Well, I think first and foremost, for our legal purposes, to have a disclaimer, we do not recommend doing a podcast from a moving vehicle. Josh is this, like Super Dave. He can do a lot of things, so we just want to make sure we don't recommend that. Yeah, I think it's always you don't know what you don't know, and I always tell customers you don't know what you don't know. So the only way to find out what's going to work is going to be testing, and this is true if we're talking about business consulting, working with businesses from one location to another. What works exactly for business A in geographic B won't work for business C in geography. So, I mean, you literally have to test to kind of find out what's going to engage people in your community, in your area, and stuff like that. So with doing testing like that, Josh, when is it time to stop testing? It's kind of, I say that just because I just watched that movie, The Mexican, and, the adage between Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts, when is enough and you leave? You never quit until you're done.
Yeah, it's definitely that. And first, I'll say I am a passenger in the vehicle right now. I'm not actively driving. Just so everybody is cool with that. I seen a Facebook post talking about Facebook Lives while driving the other day, and it was and anyways. So the when do you stop testing? I always consider that a measure of marketing stamina, right? Anytime I talk to a client about anything, I say, listen, if we're going to get into creatives and we're going to start testing creative offers, first thing we need to do is plan to fail 7 to 9 times before we actually hit a stride that's going to work. And if you don't have the marketing stamina for that, then this isn't the right thing for us to explore, because you absolutely have to test and explore to the extent that it is that it's going to work. Because if you have a good product and there is a market, the only gap in between that is you testing the right things to connect those two dots. Once you get that locked in, you can start running that like crazy. So an example of getting it locked in, right? Like a lot of people don't know that Geico has been around for 70 some years. And only in the last 25 years have they been just in everybody's face pop culture. At least in my life, that's what I noticed. Mm-hmm. They hit this thread with 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. That didn't come from oh, I've got an idea, we'll deploy it, and boom, it worked. That came from, I've exhausted 10,000 other ideas, and now this one we're trying, and boom, it worked, right? That was a result of testing. And that's been such a good campaign for them. They just ride it to the moon, and they just get new characters to say the same thing to keep it fresh and interesting. So now they test those characters instead of the messaging, right? So where do you stop testing is where your creativity runs out ultimately, right? And where the money runs out. If you don't have the financial marketing stamina to test, then you can only go so far.
Now, on average, that brings up another interesting question. Is there sort of a standard pull the plug moment on one iteration of an idea, or potentially even jumping to a new catchphrase? Let's use the Geico example. Is there, I just want to keep exploring. Is there that enough is enough? That's it. We've got to shift. We have to pivot here.
I think that only becomes true when you've gotten a certain amount of attention. This is where people sometimes people will throw up an ad, and business owners are notorious for this because business owners aren't marketers, right? It's a different skill set to run a business than it is to run a marketing campaign. So they'll do something like boost a post on Facebook, and it'll get let's say it gets 2,000 impressions, and they're like, oh, well, that just cost me $1,000, and I got all these impressions and I didn't get any response. And it's well, you didn't actually get enough real attention from your market, like your market segment, people that'd be interested in your thing, for you to decide whether that was working or not working, right? So that's, you have to have that piece of data to be able to make that decision. So commonly in the in the funnel world, if you're marketing funnels, it's if you don't get a conversion after 100 clicks, 1 in 100, then you might decide to turn that off and test something different. Because if you can't even get 1 out of 100 interested, and you've got your target segment down, then that messaging just probably isn't correct enough for you to even assume a 1% success rate on it, right? So you kind of have benchmarks like that you can go after, but the real truth is that the good marketers out there that are really that are building big brands, not just marketing offers, that are building big empires. So Grant Cardone comes to mind with this. Grant Cardone's philosophy on this is, why would I ever shut off an ad? How do I know the person that saw that wasn't sitting there eating dinner at the time, or is at a phase in their life and 2 months from now would be at the perfect phase to take advantage of this? So he'll push a marketing campaign and a narrative for months and years on end, as long as it keeps getting impressions, because he understands the power of that brand being seen a bazillion times and catching people when it's the right time for them to engage. Where if he was playing the other game on just, I didn't hit this metric, his business wouldn't be nearly as big as it is today, because sometimes it takes people 100 times of seeing your stuff in a change in life circumstance over weeks and months to become your best customer. So there is you have to have some kind of intuition on that, maybe. But I don't have any like hard stop, other than in my case, my customer's budget is my hardest stop on where I decide something is going there. But that 1% rule is a pretty good one in most cases.
Now, you brought up boosting a post on Facebook. For the average business out there that doesn't have a marketing team, that doesn't have experience with this, what are some of the biggest failures there? I know it may be frustrating of thinking I can spend $10 or $20 to test something like that, but are they really, like you kind of mentioned, giving it enough of a test that they're going to know if something works or if it doesn't? I know it's kind of frustrating for some people that you don't really know who is seeing your ad. You have to trust people, and I know we all love to trust Mark. No, we don't. Anyway, so what advice would you give some people that think, oh, I'm going to try and test a post, or I'm going to boost something or whatever on a platform like a Facebook and Instagram or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to be clear on what you're doing, right? A marketing effort is not a marketing campaign. It doesn't mean that it can't work, right? Like that's also true. You could boost a post and absolutely get sales out of it, and that's largely going to depend on your offer and what it is that who you're connected with. Very often when you're boosting a post on Facebook, not always, but very often, you're connecting with people who have connected with your Facebook page that are already familiar with you. And if you're trying to get new business, sometimes you're just marketing to the same crowd, which is not a bad thing. But depending on what your business is, right? Like we talked about roofing a few times, like how often do people get a roof? How often do people get carpet? How often so like, what is your actual frequency of buyers? Marketing to your own list sometimes is not that smart compared to trying to get new customers in that sense. So this is where it's a little tricky, where you have to realize that a marketing effort is not a marketing campaign. It'd be like going to war and saying, well, I shot a gun, so it didn't work. The war didn't work. It's like, well, a war is something that's fought by taking more and more ground as you go further and further. So that effort has to be consistent over time if you're actually going to succeed predictably. The rest of it, when people boost a post and they get something out of there, it's usually just blind luck because their offer is inherently good. I talk about this all the time. Like, a plumber doesn't have to have a unique offer, right? Like, you have a leaky pipe, we fix leaky pipes. That's all the offer takes. You just have to be the closest proximity to the person who has a leaky pipe right now. So if you boost a post and you say, hey, the water mains blew out downtown yesterday, we fix leaky pipes, you're probably going to get a whole bunch of same with roofers. Like, hey, there was a hailstorm last night, we fix hail damage on roofs, right? Like, the offer is just easy in that case. But if you're like, hey, we sell life insurance, well, it's a whole different ballgame to talk about there, right? Like, people don't need life insurance right now. Most people have a solution. So it takes a lot of effort to get them to move, where if you've got hail damage right now or a leaky pipe, you need it fixed yesterday. So you have to really understand those dynamics and not get so stuck on that your product is something that people should just buy because it's great and you believe it's great. Like, you really have to realize that some people may need some convincing, and that's not going to happen in one post.
Now, when you say marketing to your existing audience or your existing customers, how do you balance that out? Because haven't they already received, in other words, if you put a new roof on, then they know that you did a good job, you fulfilled your promise, then they already know to call you if they have a need, or to refer you, which would be natural if someone else had a need and they knew a resource. So this is a little bit of a thought process of mine, which is I don't want to be too redundant or too in the face of my existing customers, because some of them, all of them I've worked with, and therefore they know who I am. So in that case, is it a matter of constantly evolving or coming up with innovations within the brand? Is that, or what, or do you just hope that a moment comes where they can refer you? What's the thinking on that?
No, so this is a great question, and I'm glad you asked, because it made me think of this. So many years ago, maybe the 60s, a guy named Eugene Schwartz wrote a book called Breakthrough Advertising, and in it he outlined the actual customer journey. And this is the core framework that any good marketer is using when they think about how to do exactly what you're talking about, which is sending the right message to the right people. So this formula is called UPSIDE, is the acronym. So the U in UPSIDE stands for unaware market segment. These are people that aren't aware that there's a problem, let alone a solution, right? So the way you market to an unaware segment is very different than the way you market to these other segments that we'll go through. And the biggest thing with an unaware segment is you have to tell stories to convey the idea, to present the problem, to then present a solution, right? Now, the key in UPSIDE is the problem-aware people. So these are people that are aware there's a problem, but they're not necessarily aware that there's a solution. So like, oh, crap, I have hail damage now. What do I do? And like maybe somebody doesn't realize there's roofers, right? New homeowners, whatever. So they don't realize roofers do hail damage. So now it's like, hey, you have a problem called hail damage? Great. Then we have this solution, right? Solution aware is the next side. So UPSYD is the acronym. Solution aware people. These are people that are aware that there's a solution, but not necessarily aware of your solution, right? So cool. I had a problem, hail damage. I know there's a solution called roofers, but I may not know Bob's Roofing Company, right? So then the Y is your solution aware. And your solution is going to be exactly what you talked about. People that are intimately aware of your offer, they've spent money with you, and you want to be careful not to, beat them over the head in a certain way. And then the D in UPSIDE is people who are ready to make a deal, right? Those are people who are your buyers at that point. So understanding that acronym, and the reason I went through all of those things to answer that question, is each one of those segments requires a different type of messaging to keep them engaged. So specifically what you said, people who have done business with you, your marketing may not be directing them to do more business with you, but it might reinforce their decision that you are the right person to do business with to increase referrals. So I might market to people who have done business with me. I might do retargeting ads that have customer testimonials and new case studies that are interesting, that show different applications and different ways that they've been able to solve a unique problem. So now I'm giving them more interesting information around the product that they originally purchased, without beating them over the head with like, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. But now when their neighbor says, hey, I need a roofer, you go, oh, you need to go see Bob's Roofing because they just did this thing, or I keep seeing all their happy customers, or so on and so forth. Because it's not a foregone conclusion in today's day and age that if you do business with somebody, even if it was a good experience, it's not a foregone conclusion that you'll do business again, right? There's so much noise. Another offer can come up and you go, well, that sounds good. We tried the other guy last time. Let's try this guy this time, right? So the way people think is in terms of what's in front of them the most when it comes to that attention. So you have to look at each one of those segments and provide the right level of attention for where they're at in their thinking. So that formula allows you to decide how to connect with each level of thinking that somebody might be going through a buying process.
Well, and don't you think for the true scope of services, it's important to share other things with people from time to time, like the roofer you spoke about? I may think Josh is the roofer I need to talk to, but if I have a gutter issue, I might not know Josh does gutters. If I have a skylight issue, I might not know Josh does these. So by just sharing more information about different services, it might be, oh yeah, I did have a problem. I like working with Josh. I should contact him. I mean, even in legal arenas, I've seen times when a firm worked with someone to help them with a Social Security case that they make this much money on and never called them about the personal injury case that they made this much money on because they're like, oh, I didn't know you did that. So isn't it important to constantly engage and tell about other accessorial services you're offering to these past clients so that they can keep A, you top of mind, and B, they understand that you do other things?
Yeah, 100%. You have to look at that. So, and that same formula applies to each of those offers, right? It's because each service you have is a different offer. Essentially, even if they're complementary to the other one, there's still a different problem that's being solved in a different way than the other one. So yeah, 100%, that's true.
Now, let's just go back to the cheese and the whiskers for just 1 second. And in regard to when somebody hears that you're doing other, or rather let me ask this question. I've got quite a few rolling around in my head. Forgive me for a second. Testimonials. It's great to have first person testimonials, but I have seen some people fill in that gap using almost not anonymous with details. In other words, describing a type of company, not the exact company, not the exact person, not even a video of the person speaking those words. Is that a little bit more cheese, or is that a whisker? And what's the best way to handle that? Or should you be very careful with that?
So the correct answer, if we're just being like, universally correct, morally and ethically, the correct answer is you shouldn't do it, right? But the technical answer is it really depends on your marketplace. Some markets are going to be hypersensitive to something like that. If I'm going to go to let's say maybe one segment would be, if I'm going to go to a financial planner, I might want to have much more specific information to know that person is doing right by their customers than if I was going to, say, a restaurant or even a plumber, right? Like the offer and the level of personal detail involved in the offer, I think, is one of the core drivers I would look at in making that decision. I would never unilaterally be okay with anybody just having generalized generic testimonials, because it's you can play the game, right? And it's a numbers game. People say, oh, well, they've got 5 stars and it's this many, and that's what they care about, right? Like a lot of people are very short-sighted in that, but enough people look for real that all they have to do is start, like, it's a way to create instant negative word of mouth without even having a customer, right? They haven't even done business with you and they're already going, look, this person doesn't even have real reviews. So that's a real problem when, especially in the social media world, when somebody will just put you on blast on social media and everybody will go, oh man. And like, I see it all the time. We have these little, I'm sure you guys have them too, these Facebook groups that are like overheard in your area. They're in cities all over the place. So like I live in Traverse City, so overheard in Traverse City or overheard in Leelanau County. And these people will go in and talk about their experience with a restaurant or don't go talk to this guy because of this happened and this and that. And it's like, fake reviews absolutely are going to get blasted in a group like that. Like, why does this person have fake reviews? Go over to this person. And if nothing else, your competitor, if they're going to be the real player in the game, they're going to look at it and they're going to call you out for it every single time a customer brings it up. They might even call you out publicly. So there's a real danger to it in that if people are paying attention, but it's also like you can get away with it if it's depending on the offer, and also depending on how good you are at presenting the offer. If everything else looks good, everything else is perfectly fine, that whisker may not be perceived as a whisker. It might just be perceived as some dust in the air or whatever, right? And the mouse just keeps chewing through the wall. So there's a level of packaging that's involved in as far as how well you're delivering that offer.
Well, you mentioned reviews. So let's talk a little bit about reviews with regards to the whisker or the cheese. How often do you see people that freak out because they get a negative review, and it may not even be from someone that they know or work with? It could be something that's fictitious, and they freak out about that instead of just moving forward, getting more positive reviews, addressing them, and stuff like that. So, what advice would you give people about potentially negative reviews or acquiring more positive reviews?
Yeah. So first and foremost, get negative reviews. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say. The click-through rate on companies, the last statistic I seen is something like 5 times higher on people who have negative reviews, right? And the reason is because they want to see what the problem is and decide if that's a problem they care about. Most of the time, your negative reviews are unreasonable people, and they're either emotional when they leave the negative review, or they just want to be done with something, but they wanted to say their piece, so they come in and say terrible service. Well, that's a negative review, but it doesn't do anything to tell a customer why they shouldn't work with you, right? Like it's just a statement. Then other people will write an entire story on the whole thing, and people go, wow, this person's really emotional, and I can't believe they cared about this, that, or the other thing, right? And what's even more important than the negative review, or like you mentioned, Glenn, like getting positive reviews, you still want to do that constantly, right? Like if you can be, say 4.7 stars out of, every 100 reviews or something, 1 or 2 negative reviews is good in this case. Getting down to like 3.5 stars because you've got too many negative reviews, that's a problem. But the more important thing in the negative review side of it is how you respond to that negative review. And I have a 4-step response for this. So the first is you acknowledge that they claimed there was a problem. You don't take responsibility and say there was a problem, we own it. You just acknowledge that they've made a claim to this. You thank them for that. So you give them a thank you for the feedback on it, because that gives you a chance to address things with your team and create a better service overall. Lastly, you offer a potential solution to the problem, or rather an explanation of how you generally solve the problem, right? And the last piece is you invite them to reach out to you or a manager to seek a better resolution. You don't promise a specific resolution on the response, but when you go through that acknowledgement, thank you, explanation of what's normally done, and reach out to me personally for a resolution, you show that a negative review is something, 1, you take seriously, 2, you care about your business and the customers that are there, and 3, you publicly and proactively gave everybody else an understanding and an explanation of your side of the story without accusing anybody of anything, without getting into tit for tat, and you strengthen your marketing exponentially because of that increased click-through rate. Now people finish with your narrative instead of the negative review narrative. And that's what's more important than anything else. So besides just always getting good reviews, that practice is something that I promise you will make you more money than you realize you're leaving on the table by not doing that.
If I may, Paul, should you also address positive reviews as well as negative reviews?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. But I don't have a formula for that, as much as like, if you can tell a little bit of the story, like, thank you for stopping in. I know you were a little concerned about this product versus that product. So glad we found the right one for you, that kind of stuff. But, you want to do something more than thank you, and something less than like the entire scope of everything. So that way, like if people look through your responses, right, there's natural patterns and rhythms we all have. And if somebody's doing this all perfectly across the board, it's sort of like it doesn't feel organic. So if you had a formulaic way to respond to positive reviews, as people start reading, it would feel formulaic. Where if you have sort of a natural response to the review that is at least descriptive, now it looks like you're responding to situations and that you actually understand the people in a different way, because you can't respond to each of them in a true, descriptive way without having that understanding. So that's what I would say strengthens it more than anything else than a formula on positive reviews.
Mm-hmm. So yet again, Glenn, when it comes to social media, you have to develop a thick skin.
Yes.
You have to be able to weather the storm.
Because it's amazing how people are much more, let's say, direct and much more intense when there's a computer and a wire and maybe the internet in between one of us.
It's a true thing. And I think an important thing to understand in business, anybody who's in business, is that you don't have to attach your emotion to your thinking, right? It doesn't have to be an emotional thing. If a negative review scares you, in some cases, that's because you know that you had done something wrong, right? Like you're going into some guilt or shame, and then there's a freak out there. So like, just give yourself permission to have whatever feelings you have, but realize your business has nothing to do with it, and neither does that transaction. That's just your feelings. And I have to coach clients on this frequently because business is such a personal thing, especially small business to people, because they just they invest so much of their time, money, and energy into it that it's a huge, it feels like a huge black mark when it's really just this little tiny black tick in the whole thing that actually strengthens the entire marketing process. So yeah, it's a personal decision at that point, but you definitely got to be able to roll with it.
Well, I tell you, I'm sure that our audience is as intrigued and also as hopeful when you give that sort of advice, because that's great advice for weathering circumstances that we often don't have control of. But you're saying there are ways to take control of that it's not, as we often say, Glenn, there is no success without failure. There is no learning without embracing what the experience ultimately can teach.
Well, and here's one of the key distinctions that I think every business coach on the planet has told their clients, but it never really gets through because it doesn't feel like it's true. But not everybody is your customer, and if somebody's not your customer, who cares? There's plenty of other customers out there. And by the way, some of the most, quote, hated people are some of the most successful, right? Like, I don't want to go into any political stuff here, but like, look at all of the people that hate somebody like Trump, and the dude is still doing plenty of business. Or even the people that are aligned with him that people hate, they're still doing crazy amounts of business. Hate is something, and even the negative responses to things is something that is actually a building block to your success rather than a hindrance, as long as you don't let it hold you down, because anything that's negative is attention. And that's why I have that formula on the negative reviews, because when you get that attention, you get to have the last word. And now that you've got attention, you just sold somebody that might not have been sold because of the other things. So like, and they might not have cared because that negative review wasn't there. So now you have an asset in marketing instead of a detriment, and you have to be able to appreciate that for what it is.
So in other words, you're taking someone who's unaware of a problem, making them aware of both the problem and the solution. You're actually moving them up the chain very quickly based on a negative review. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. One good marketing message can move somebody from unaware to deal in seconds, right? Because it just connects the right way. And this is a perfect example of being able to do that. Yeah.
Now, you brought up emotions. So I want to circle back around a little bit to messages you're sending out, because I've had this conversation quite frequently in the last month about, is your client or potential customer thinking emotionally or analytically? As an example, if someone's been injured in a car accident, they're probably thinking a little bit more emotionally when they're looking for an attorney, as opposed to someone's looking for a business attorney. They're probably thinking a little bit more analytical. So do you have to be aware of the potential customer's mindset when creating a message?
Yeah, so there's a framework that Russell Brunson kind of popularized that is beautiful for this. And as much as possible in every communication that you have, you should try to use this. And the framework is called emotion, logic, fear. And every messaging starts with the emotional component of the message that is reinforced messaging, that then includes some level of scarcity to provoke action in the messaging. Those three things together are they really encompass. It's sort of the shortcut to like the Robert Cialdini principles, kind of the kindergarten version of that, if you will. And if you're not familiar with that, that's Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence, and it's the science and art of persuasion. It's foundationally what most marketing principles are built on today is that book. But this emotion, logic, fear is, even if you're talking about something like roofing, it's like the emotional part would be like, what could roof damage lead in terms of harm to your property or people you care about, right? Mold, just potentially being open to the elements, um, you know, uh, animals getting in, any of that sort of stuff, right? So you can tell an emotional story around that of like, don't stay up, uh, uh, don't lose sleep every night wondering if tonight's the night that the roof caves in, right? Our people can fix it in less than 24 hours using our patented blah, blah, blah system, which is logic, 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 right? Reinforcing. And if you act in the next 72 hours, we'll cover the deductible for your insurance, right? So scarcity is that last piece. And if you work on crafting your message that way, sometimes it's as simple as like right now I'm looking at a floral shop. Like sometimes the emotional piece is as simple as, wouldn't she love wouldn't she love a bouquet of beautiful flowers? And then the logic is, pick these up today and have her smile tonight, right? And then the scarcity is, if you come in before 2 o'clock, we have a 10% discount, right? And now you're covering these bases. So that takes a little bit more like thinking and flushing out as to what those are, because every market is a different emotional response. Sometimes it might, instead of a negative emotion, it might be a positive one, like um, be the uh, be the pride of the neighborhood with a brand new roof, right? Like some men are really prideful about their property and this and that. So now like you can tap into that positive emotional side and so on and so forth. And it's the biggest challenge is taking something as mundane as roof and making it an emotional, logical thing. And that's where, if you can challenge yourself to do that, you can get the other easy things right. Like emotion on a new car is really easy, right? When you can break down what the emotion is on a roof. So emotion, logic, fear, that's the framework.
All right.
I thought he was going to say Josh can make a roof look sexy.
Just need a lawn chair and a ladder. That's all.
So you've been giving us a lot of different marketing tricks. I want to go all the way back to your bio. Can you tell us what was your go-to magic trick as you were developing that aspect of your career? What were you known for, or conversely, what was one of your favorite tricks to do? We don't want the insider info, just describe it.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like I've always had my own style with it. I mean, I was never the like magic magician, right? Like I was never trying to be mystical or whatever. It's just like we were gonna have some fun and do some tricks. So card tricks are what I got really good at, but to I don't know if this informs the answer or is just a long-winded way for me to say it, but I'll say it anyways. Like, I never got into magic to perform magic. I actually didn't want to perform it. I got in it because I loved the idea that there was some mechanical situation that somebody couldn't perceive that resulted in this surprise, right? Like, I wanted to understand that mechanical structure. So an awful lot of what I got where I got good at it was like I would be messing around with the mechanical structure and people would be like, do something, and I'd be like, no. And they'd be like, you got to do something, and I was like, all right, fine. So they would like, convince me to show them a trick. And the tricks that I would go to the most and still do today are card tricks. So there's one that's called the ambitious card, which is a card keeps going into the middle of the pack and magically ends up on the top of the pack in seemingly impossible ways, and it gets increasingly more impossible and unlikely as we go through the whole routine. And the whole routine ends with, the whole deck ends up becoming that same card, and then the deck disappears and all that's left is just the card, and so on and so forth. So I've been doing some variation of that for over 20 years now, as a solid go-to. And what I really am known for with the magic stuff is more of my style with it. I'm very, very good at directing attention without seeming like I'm doing that. And every magician is to a certain degree, but I'm able to account and roll with situations as they happen in real time in a way that looks like it was never, it could have been planned that way, right? Like it was never a problem when it was actually everything was on the line and nobody knows it, right? That's actually when my friends say do a trick, that's the stuff they love to watch the most, is like that whole thing just about went off the rails, like a split second and you said the wrong thing, it would have been gone. And I take it right back to, a really great show. So that's where I have the most fun too.
All right.
I've seen it in person, Paul. I've heard people go, ooh, ah.
Yeah. Well, now here we can call this episode Marketing Magic.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, Josh B. Magic. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. If anybody would want to reach out and contact you, what's the best way to do so?
I knew you were going to ask me that just as soon as you started wrapping up. And the best way is just to catch me on Facebook. Just friend request me on Facebook. I don't really, I'm a marketer, but I'm not really all that interested in marketing myself. So find me on Facebook. It's just, facebook.com/Josh Beechraft is Beechraft. And then friend request me there. And if you got any questions or anything like that, I'm always happy to answer them.
Cool.
Yep.
Appreciate it, Josh.
Well, thanks for another great week.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me on again. And thanks for being tolerant of my mobile situation at the moment. Hopefully that's not too much for anybody paying attention. So I appreciate you all.
Great stuff.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Everyone, we'll see you back. Same channel, same time next week. Take care, everyone.